It wasn't just any day. It was the day. The kind of day that makes you feel alive, if only because everything you believe to be true gets shattered in a single moment. I stood outside the glass door of his office, listening. Inside, laughter echoed. The deep baritone voice of Thomas, my wife Emily's boss, carried through the crack of the door. "Well," Thomas said with a self-satisfied chuckle, "I left that idiot penniless, and even got his beautiful wife. That's worth celebrating." The sound of a cork popping sent a flash of red behind my eyes. Whiskey? He was toasting to my destruction. To stealing my wife? I adjusted my grip on the pistol tucked under my jacket. I had no plan when I walked in here. Just raw fury and the crushing weight of betrayal. My fingers pushed the door open slowly. There he was, sitting behind his mahogany desk, the bastard. He didn't even hear me step in. "What are we celebrating, Thomas?" I asked, voice cold enough to freeze lava. He jumped, spilling a little of his precious drink on his tailored suit. Before he could answer, I shoved the barrel of the gun against the back of his head. "Care to repeat that toast?" I growled. His breath hitched. "And now, wait. Let's talk about this." "Oh, I plan to talk," I said, pressing the gun harder. "But first, you are going to explain why you thought it was a good idea to mess with my life." The silence was suffocating. Then, like the coward he was, Thomas tried to spin some excuse. His words ran together, a pathetic mix of blame-shifting and pleading. But before I could pull the trigger, the sound of my wife's voice tore through the fog of rage. "What the hell are you doing, David?" I turned to see Emily standing in the doorway, her face a mix of fury and fear. And just like that, the moment turned into something else entirely. "Emily," I said, my voice cracking from a mixture of anger and disbelief. "So, this is what we've come to?" Her lips tightened, and she crossed her arms like I was the one at fault. "Put the gun down, David. Don't make this worse than it already is." I laughed bitterly, a sound that felt foreign even to my own ears. "Worse than you sneaking behind my back with this clown? Worse than him bragging about leaving me penniless and stealing my wife?" Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his cowardice on full display as he dared not move. Emily stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply on the polished floor. "You don't understand." "Understand?" I cut her off, my voice rising. "What exactly am I not understanding, Emily? That my wife, the woman I loved, betrayed me for her boss? That you've been lying to my face while I've been killing myself to make us a life?" She scoffed, brushing her perfectly manicured fingers through her hair. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, David. You're always like this, jumping to conclusions, overreacting. It's exhausting." "Overreacting?" I repeated, lowering the gun just slightly. The audacity of her words left me stunned. "You're unbelievable." I heard him, Emily. He admitted to everything. Thomas seized the moment to interject, his voice shaky but trying to sound authoritative. "Listen, David. Let's not make rash decisions here. We're all adults." I pointed the gun at him again, and he froze mid-sentence. "I wasn't talking to you." Emily rolled her eyes like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "David, grow up. You're embarrassing yourself. This has nothing to do with you or whatever fantasies you've cooked up in your head." Her words hit me harder than any punch ever could. My fingers trembled around the gun as I struggled to process what she was saying. "You've been sneaking out at night. Taking longer trips to visit your sister. Coming home smelling like cologne that isn't mine. And you have the gall to tell me I'm imagining things?" Emily smirked. Like I was some fool who'd just been bested in a game I didn't even know we were playing. "You're paranoid, David. Always have been. Maybe if you spent less time being suspicious and more time being a real man, we wouldn't be in this mess. The room went silent except for the faint ticking of the office clock. I couldn't tell if my heart was racing or had stopped altogether. "Emily," I said slowly, my voice thick with barely contained rage, "if I'm such a failure, why didn't you just leave?" She shrugged. "Why would I? You've got nothing worth taking. Thomas, on the other hand." Her words trailed off, but the implication was clear. Thomas gave a nervous chuckle, but it died quickly when he saw the look in my eyes. "That's it," I said, lowering the gun and turning toward her fully. "That's who you've become. You don't even feel bad, do you? Not a shred of guilt for ripping apart everything we built?" Emily laughed, a cold, hollow sound that sent a chill down my spine. "Oh, please. Spare me the 'we built this together' speech. You were barely keeping us afloat. Always whining about bills and budgets. Thomas knows how to live, how to give me what I deserve." The venom in her words made my blood boil. But it wasn't just anger I felt, it was heartbreak. The kind that sinks into your bones and leaves you hollow. "Deserve?" I echoed. "And what exactly do you think you deserve, Emily?" She stepped closer, her eyes locking with mine, daring me to challenge her. "Someone who doesn't spend his life complaining. Someone who knows how to treat a woman, not bore her to death with excuses." Thomas, emboldened by her presence, decided to chime in again. "David, look. Emily made her choice. Maybe it's time you accepted it." That was it. The final straw. I slammed the gun down on his desk with a force that made both of them jump. "You think this is over?" I said, my voice low but shaking with intensity. "You think you can just waltz into my life, ruin everything, and walk away scot-free?" Thomas opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Emily cut in. "Oh, grow up, David. What are you going to do? Cry? Call your lawyer?" Her taunts were like daggers, each one twisting deeper. But instead of breaking, something inside me snapped. I straightened up, my hands no longer trembling. "You're right, Emily. There's no point in crying over you. But don't think for a second this is the end." She laughed again, clearly unbothered. "What are you going to do, David? You don't have the guts to." I didn't let her finish. "You'll find out soon enough," I said, grabbing the gun and storming out of the office. Behind me, I heard Thomas muttering nervously, but Emily's laughter followed me like a ghost. As I stepped into the cold night air, the weight of the betrayal settled on my chest like a stone. I drove aimlessly through the city, my mind racing, each thought sharper and more dangerous than the last. Emily's words echoed like a broken record. "You've got nothing worth taking." Her laugh, cold and mocking, burned in my ears. My knuckles whitened as I gripped the steering wheel. I couldn't go home, not yet. The house we shared felt like a crime scene now, a monument to every lie she'd ever told. Instead, I parked in a shadowy corner of an empty lot and stared at the gun lying on the passenger seat. What was I supposed to do now? File for divorce? Let them walk away unscathed? That wasn't justice. Not for the years of my life I'd poured into a marriage built on deceit. Not for the humiliation. The idea came slowly, like a predator stalking its prey. They had underestimated me. Both of them. I picked up my phone, scrolling through old messages and bank statements, piecing together a picture of betrayal. Emily had grown sloppy in her lies. There were credit card charges for lavish dinners I'd never attended. Hotel bookings during her supposed family visits. And one message from Thomas that she must have forgotten to delete. "Last night was unforgettable. Can't wait to see you again." I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. These two had planned my downfall, taken everything I cared about, and expected me to crumble. But they didn't know me as well as they thought. I dialed a number. "Mark, it's David," I said when my old friend answered. "I need a favor." Mark, a private investigator who owed me one, didn't ask questions. He never did. Within an hour, he'd sent me everything he could find on Thomas Green, his finances, property holdings, and even the address of a cabin he owned on the outskirts of town. Perfect. The next day, I played my part. At breakfast, I sat across from Emily, who barely acknowledged my presence as she scrolled through her phone. Her usual arrogance was on full display, as though she hadn't been caught red-handed just hours earlier. "Morning," she said flatly, not even glancing up. "Morning," I replied, forcing a calm tone. "I thought we could talk." She finally looked up, her eyes narrowing. "About what? Last night? Are we still doing this, David? Can't you just let it go?" "Let it go?" The words tasted bitter. I bit back my anger and nodded. "You're right. Maybe I've been too controlling, too uptight. I've been thinking about what you said." Her brows arched in surprise. "Really?" "Yeah," I said, smiling faintly. "You deserve better, Emily. I want to make things right. Maybe we could take a trip to clear our heads. Start fresh." She tilted her head, suspicious but intrigued. "What kind of trip?" "Something simple. Maybe that cabin you mentioned a while back. The one Thomas owns. It could be good for us." Her lips curled into a smirk. She thought she'd won. "You'd really be okay with that?" I nodded. "Anything to fix this, Emily." She hesitated, but greed got the better of her. "All right. I'll talk to Thomas. He might be out of town this weekend, so it could work." "Great," I said, masking the venom in my voice. By the time Friday rolled around, we were packed and driving toward the cabin. Emily seemed unnervingly at ease, chatting about the reset we supposedly needed. She had no idea I'd already been to the cabin earlier that day, thanks to Mark. I'd prepared everything. When we arrived, the place was pristine. Thomas's wealth was apparent in the sleek furnishings and the stocked liquor cabinet. Emily wandered around, pouring herself a drink and taking in the scenery. "This is nice," she said, her tone almost cheerful. "Maybe you're finally learning how to treat me right." I forced a laugh. "Yeah, maybe." As the evening wore on, I kept the charade going, playing the doting husband, letting her think she was in control. But every word she spoke, every condescending glance, fueled the fire inside me. When she finally went to bed, I made my move. Quietly, I stepped outside and waited. The cold night air bit at my skin, but I didn't care. I had sent Thomas a message from Emily's phone earlier, asking him to come to the cabin. He wouldn't refuse her. Sure enough, his car pulled up just after midnight. I watched from the shadows as he stepped out, looking smug as ever. He carried a bottle of champagne, his idea of celebration. "Emily," he called, his voice low but confident. Before he could take another step, I emerged from the darkness. "Looking for someone?" I asked, the gun glinting in my hand. Thomas froze, his eyes wide. "David, what the hell?" "Shut up," I snapped. "Drop the bottle." He did as I said, his hands trembling. "Look, we can talk about this." I took a step closer, the gun trained on his chest. "Talk? Is that what you told Emily when you were sneaking around behind my back? When you were plotting to take everything from me?" His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I want to hear you say it," I demanded. "Admit what you did." Thomas stammered, sweat pouring down his face. "It wasn't personal, David. It's just business." "Business?" I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You call destroying my life business?" Before he could respond, I pressed the barrel against his temple. You think you've won, don't you? But this is just the beginning, Thomas. Just wait. Thomas's breathing was shallow, his eyes darting around in a desperate search for escape. But there was none. The cabin was isolated, miles from the nearest town, and I had the advantage. David, he started, his voice trembling, this doesn't have to end like this. Look, I made a mistake. I'll admit it. I'll do whatever you want, just let me go. His pathetic plea only deepened my disgust. For a man so confident in his ability to steal, lie, and manipulate, he crumbled like wet paper when confronted. Let you go? I said, my voice cold. You think I drove all the way out here to just let you go? The weight of the gun in my hand was a reminder of the choices I had to make. But a single pull of the trigger wasn't enough for what he'd done. Here's what's going to happen, I continued, my tone sharp. You're going to tell me everything. Every disgusting detail about how you and Emily planned this. How long it's been going on, where the money's gone, and what you've been saying behind my back. If I even think you're lying, I let the threat hang in the air, the cold steel of the gun barrel pressing harder against his skin. Thomas gulped, nodding furiously. Okay. I'll tell you everything. Just put the gun down. No, I said flatly. Start talking. He inhaled sharply, then began spilling the truth like a broken dam. It started about a year ago, he said. She came to me after one of your fights, said you weren't good enough for her anymore, that she deserved better. The bile rose in my throat, but I said nothing, letting him continue. At first, it was just casual, he said, avoiding my gaze. We'd meet at hotels or during business trips. But then she started talking about wanting more. About leaving you. She said, he hesitated, his voice trailing off. What did she say? I barked. Thomas flinched. She said you were holding her back. That you'd never amount to anything, and she couldn't waste her life on someone so pathetic. The words hit harder than I expected, but I refused to let him see it. I gestured for him to go on. Eventually, she convinced me to help her. She said she wanted you out of the picture for good. She even mentioned wanting to fake some kind of scandal to ruin you. We were going to. He stopped, his face pale as he realized what he'd just admitted. You were going to what? I asked, my voice a low growl. He shook his head, tears beginning to form. Nothing. It doesn't matter anymore. I cocked the gun, the sound echoing in the still night. I asked you a question. We were going to frame you, he shouted, the words tumbling out in panic. Some bogus charges with the company, make it look like you were embezzling money. Emily said it would be easy to convince people because of how desperate you've been lately. My vision blurred with rage. They hadn't just been sleeping together, they'd been plotting my downfall from every angle. And what about the money? I asked. Thomas hesitated again, but the look in my eyes made him reconsider. She's been funneling it into an account in her name. The joint savings, your investments, they're practically drained. She said it was for your future, but she's been using it for herself. Every word felt like another knife to the heart. Emily had taken everything. My trust, my finances, my dignity. But if she thought I'd let her get away with it, she was sorely mistaken. I took a step back, lowering the gun slightly. Get on your knees, I ordered. What? You heard me. On your knees. Thomas complied, his expensive suit wrinkling as he dropped to the hardwood floor. He looked up at me, his face a mask of terror. You've spent the past year tearing apart my life, I said, my voice low and menacing. Now you're going to fix it. How? He asked desperately. You're going to make a call to Emily, I said, tossing his phone onto the floor in front of him. You're going to tell her you're done with her, that you're cutting her off. Then you're going to transfer every last cent back into my accounts. Thomas hesitated, glancing at the gun in my hand. And if I don't? Then you won't have to worry about Emily or your accounts ever again. His hands shook as he picked up the phone and dialed. The call was short, filled with weak excuses about needing space and focusing on his career. Emily's voice came through the speaker, laced with anger and disbelief. "You're leaving me," she spat. "After everything I've done for you?" "I'm sorry," Thomas stammered. "But it's over." When the call ended, he quickly began transferring the funds, his fingers flying across the screen. "Done," he said, holding the phone up to show me the confirmation. I leaned in close, my face inches from his. "Good. Now get out of here. If I ever see you again, you won't be walking away." He scrambled to his feet, nearly tripping over himself as he ran out the door. I stood there for a moment, the cold air rushing in as his car sped off into the night. Emily had no idea what was coming. The following morning, I sat at the kitchen table in the cabin, sipping coffee and waiting for Emily to wake up. My mind buzzed with the events of the night before, Thomas's pathetic groveling, the transfer of funds, and, most of all, his spineless betrayal of Emily when things got too real for him. The door to the bedroom creaked open, and Emily emerged, her silk robe lazily tied at the waist, hair still a mess from sleep. She looked at me with mild surprise, probably wondering why I was up so early. "Morning," she said, a yawn stretching her words. "Morning," I replied, my tone neutral. "Sleep well?" She poured herself a coffee, her back to me. "I did, actually. This place is nice. You finally got something right, David." I bit my tongue. Her condescension was a drop in the ocean compared to what I had planned. "Emily," I said, setting my mug down carefully, "we need to talk." She turned to face me, her expression wary. "About what now? You're not going to start whining about last week again, are you?" "No," I said with a faint smile. "This is about Thomas." Her face froze for the briefest moment before she quickly masked it with annoyance. "What about him? Are we really dragging him into this again? Can you just let it go?" "Let it go," I echoed, leaning back in my chair. "You know, that seems to be your answer for everything, doesn't it? Lie, cheat, steal, and then just move on. Like nothing happened." Her eyes narrowed, and she crossed her arms. "What's your point, David? If you've got something to say, just say it." "Oh, I've got plenty to say," I replied, standing up and pacing slowly. "I spoke to Thomas last night." The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. "What are you talking about?" "That's impossible. He's out of town." "Is that what he told you?" I asked, smirking. "Because he wasn't very far last night. In fact, he was right here." Her lips parted as if to argue, but no words came out. I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a cold whisper. "He told me everything, Emily. How long it's been going on. How you both planned to ruin me. How you emptied our accounts and laughed behind my back." "That's not true," she snapped, her voice rising in defiance. "He's lying to you because he's a coward." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, he's a coward, all right. But he didn't lie about this." I grabbed my phone from the counter and opened the voice recording app, hitting play. Thomas's panicked confession from the night before filled the room. Every word, her insults, her plans, her disdain for me, rang out like a courtroom verdict. Emily's mouth moved silently, her brain scrambling for a defense. "You recorded him," she finally said, her voice trembling with a mix of fury and fear. "I did," I said, my tone sharp. "You see, Emily, unlike you, I'm not stupid enough to leave loose ends." Her expression hardened, her fear morphing into anger. "So what now, David? You're going to use that to blackmail me? Ruin me?" Is that the pathetic little revenge you've been dreaming of? I stepped closer, my smile fading. I don't need to blackmail you. I've already taken back every penny you stole. The joint accounts? Emptied. The investments? Reclaimed. And your little scheme to frame me? Dead in the water. Thomas sang like a canary last night. Her eyes widened in shock. You can't do that. Oh, but I did, I said, my voice brimming with satisfaction. And now, it's time for you to face the consequences. She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. Consequences? Don't make me laugh, David. You think you're some big man because you got your money back. Guess what? You're still the same pathetic, insecure loser you've always been. That's why I cheated on you. That's why I needed someone like Thomas. Her words were venomous, each one cutting deeper than the last. Are you done? I asked quietly, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. She smirked, as if she thought she'd won. Oh, I'm far from done, David. You might think you've beaten me, but let's see how well you do when everyone finds out how unhinged you've become. Go ahead, play your little recordings. Who do you think people will believe? Me, or the husband who's waving a gun around? I stared at her for a long moment, the silence growing heavy. Then, I smiled. You know what, Emily? I said, stepping back. You're right. People always believe the victim. Her smirk faltered. What's that supposed to mean? I grabbed my car keys and walked toward the door, pausing just long enough to glance back at her. Pack your things. When we get back, I want you out of my house. And don't worry, I've already filed for divorce. Good luck convincing a judge to give you anything after this. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw true panic on her face. You can't do this, she shouted. You don't get to walk away from me. Oh, Emily, I said, opening the door. Watch me. As I drove away from the cabin, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Emily's lies, her manipulation, her venom, it was all behind me now. I wasn't the man she thought she could destroy. I was stronger than that. But this wasn't over yet. There were still loose ends to tie up, and I wasn't done cleaning up the mess they'd made of my life. What would I do next? Well, that was entirely up to me. The silence in the car was deafening as I drove back to town. My grip on the steering wheel was firm, knuckles white from the tension coursing through me. The cabin, and everything it represented, was in my rearview mirror. Emily's venomous words echoed in my mind, each one a reminder of how far she'd fallen from the woman I thought I married. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. There was still work to be done, and I was far from finished. The first stop was my lawyer's office. Greg Thompson, a sharp-witted man with decades of experience in family law, greeted me with a look of mild surprise. I hadn't told him the full extent of my plans, but he'd been on retainer since the day I first suspected Emily's betrayal. You're early, he said, gesturing for me to sit. I wasn't expecting to see you until next week. I couldn't wait, I said, setting my phone on his desk. I have everything we need to move forward. Recordings, financial documents, and a full confession from the man she's been cheating with. Greg's eyebrows rose in interest. That's a strong case. With this kind of evidence, we can ensure she walks away with nothing. That's exactly what I want, I said firmly. No alimony, no settlements, nothing. And I want to make sure she can't touch a single dime of what I've worked for ever again. Greg nodded, a small smirk playing on his lips. Consider it done. With what you've brought me, I'd be shocked if the court didn't rule entirely in your favor. I'll get the paperwork started immediately. As I left his office, a sense of satisfaction settled over me. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control. Emily had taken so much from me, my trust, my stability, my peace of mind, but she wouldn't take another thing. The next step was confronting the fallout at work. Thomas, for all his arrogance, had left a trail of breadcrumbs that tied him to Emily's financial schemes. While he'd been careful to cover his tracks initially, his panicked confession had given me everything I needed to expose him. I walked into the office with purpose, my head held high. The receptionist gave me a surprised look as I strode past her desk, heading straight for the conference room where the board was holding their weekly meeting. The room fell silent as I entered, all eyes turning to me. "David," one of the board members said cautiously, "this is a closed meeting. Is there something you need?" "Yes," I said, setting a folder down on the table. "This won't take long, but it's important." I opened the folder, pulling out copies of the financial documents Thomas had tampered with. For the past year, Thomas has been funneling company funds into personal accounts. I have proof, along with a recorded confession. The room erupted in shocked murmurs, the board members exchanging incredulous glances. "Are you serious?" one of them asked. "Dead serious," I replied. "And there's more. He's been using company resources to cover up an affair with my wife. They've both been plotting to ruin me financially and professionally." The door opened behind me, and I turned to see Thomas entering the room, his face pale as he realized what was happening. "David, what the hell are you doing?" he demanded, his voice shaky. "I'm doing what you should have done months ago," I said calmly. "Taking responsibility." I handed the evidence to the board, letting them pore over the documents and listen to the recording. By the time it was over, Thomas looked like he wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. "Effective immediately," one of the board members said, glaring at Thomas, "You're terminated. Security will escort you out of the building, and will be pursuing legal action for embezzlement." Thomas tried to stammer a defense, but it was useless. As security led him out, he shot me a look of pure hatred. "This isn't over," he hissed. "Oh, it is," I said with a smirk. "For you, at least." That evening, I returned home to find Emily's things packed and waiting on the front porch. True to her word, she'd decided to leave before I could force her out. She was sitting in her car, glaring at me as I approached. "You think you've won, don't you?" she sneered, her voice dripping with malice. "I don't think," I said. "I know." Her laugh was cold and hollow. "Enjoy it while it lasts, David. You'll never be happy. You'll never find someone who loves you the way I did." I stared at her, a strange mix of pity and anger bubbling within me. "You're right about one thing, Emily," I said. "I'll never find someone like you again. And thank God for that." Her expression darkened, but she said nothing as she slammed the door and drove away. As I stood there, watching her car disappear down the street, a weight lifted off my shoulders. Emily and Thomas were finally out of my life, and I could start to rebuild. But there was still one final step to take. Something that would ensure neither of them could ever hurt anyone else the way they'd hurt me. Days passed, but my mind refused to rest. Even with Emily gone and Thomas fired, a gnawing sense of unfinished business lingered in my chest. I'd won every battle, but the war still felt incomplete. One evening, as I sat in my dimly lit living room nursing a glass of whiskey, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello?" "David," a man's voice rasped. "We need to talk." It took me a moment to place the voice, but then it hit me like a freight train. It was Thomas. "What do you want?" I asked coldly. "Just, hear me out," he said, his voice desperate. "I know you don't owe me anything, but I'm in trouble. Big trouble. And it's all because of her. Emily." "Of course. What kind of trouble?" I asked, more curious than concerned. "She's blackmailing me," he said, his words tumbling out in a frantic rush. "She took everything I had left. The money, the connections, everything. She's threatening to go public with things I can't let get out. Please, David. I'll do anything to fix this. Just meet me. A part of me wanted to hang up, to leave him to the mess he'd created. But another part, the part that craved closure, wanted to hear more. Where? I asked. He gave me an address, a dingy motel on the outskirts of town. The motel was as grimy as I'd expected, its neon sign flickering ominously in the dark. Room 12. I knocked twice, and the door creaked open to reveal Thomas, looking worse than I'd ever seen him. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and there was a faint bruise forming on his cheek. Come in, he said, stepping aside. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and cheap booze. A half-empty bottle of whiskey sat on the nightstand, and papers were scattered across the bed. What is this? I asked, gesturing to the chaos. Evidence, he said, his voice shaking. Emily's not just a liar, she's dangerous. She's been playing us both, David. She used me to get to you, and now she's moved on to someone else. Someone worse. I frowned, picking up one of the papers. It was a bank statement, showing a massive deposit from an account I didn't recognize. This isn't hers, I said. No, Thomas replied, his face grim. It belongs to a man named Victor Marino. A guy you don't want to cross. The name sent a chill down my spine. Victor Marino was infamous, a ruthless businessman rumored to have ties to organized crime. What does Marino have to do with this? I asked. Thomas hesitated, then sighed. Emily's been laundering money for him. She used me to set up the accounts and funnel the cash through your investments. When I got fired, she cut me loose and took over herself. Now she's in over her head, and she's dragging us both down with her. I stared at him, my mind racing. This was bigger than I'd imagined. Emily wasn't just a manipulative cheater, she was playing a dangerous game, and we were the collateral damage. So why call me? I asked. Why not go to the cops? He laughed bitterly. You think the cops can protect us from Marino? No, David. The only way to end this is to stop her before she drags us both under. Before I could respond, there was a loud knock at the door. Thomas, a deep voice growled from the other side, open up. Thomas's face went pale. It's him, he whispered. I reached for the pistol I'd started carrying since Emily's betrayal and motioned for Thomas to stay quiet. The knock came again, harder this time. Last chance, Thomas, the voice said. I positioned myself by the door, gun drawn, and nodded for Thomas to unlock it. He did so reluctantly, stepping back as the door swung open. A tall, imposing man entered, his sharp suit contrasting with the dingy surroundings. His eyes immediately locked onto me, narrowing in suspicion. Who's this? Marino asked, his tone dangerous. Just a friend, I said evenly, keeping the gun hidden but ready. Marino smirked. Thomas here owes me something. Step aside, and this won't concern you. Afraid I can't do that, I said. Marino's smirk faded, replaced by a cold glare. You don't know who you're dealing with, do you? Actually, I do, I replied, raising the gun. And I'm not afraid of you. The room was tense, the air thick with the potential for violence. Marino studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right, he said, stepping back. I'll give you one chance to fix this. Bring me Emily. Alive. She's the one who owes me, not you. And if we don't? Thomas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Marino's smile was cold. Then you both pay the price. He left without another word, the sound of his footsteps fading into the night. As the door closed, I turned to Thomas, my jaw tight. We're in this together now, I said. He nodded, his face a mix of fear and determination. What's the plan? We find Emily, I said, my voice firm. And we end this, once and for all. The hunt for Emily had begun, and I knew one thing for certain, this would be the most dangerous game I'd ever played. The search for Emily began with a trail of lies and loose ends. Thomas and I dug into her social media, bank transactions, and old contacts. Every lead painted a picture of a woman spiraling deeper into chaos. Emily wasn't running scared, she was calculating, using Marino's money to disappear without a trace. It was Thomas who cracked the code. Late one night, he stumbled upon an encrypted email in an account they had shared. After hours of trying password after password, he finally got in. She's in Vegas, he said, staring at the screen. She's booked a suite at the Solara Grand. Big money. Then that's where we go, I replied. The lights of Las Vegas were blinding, a chaotic swirl of neon and excess. As we approached the Solara Grand, the stakes couldn't have felt higher. Emily had always loved the spotlight, and the Solara's opulent surroundings were the perfect stage for her grand escape. We found her in the casino, seated at a high-stakes poker table. She looked as poised as ever, wearing a crimson dress that turned heads. But there was an edge to her, a desperation in her eyes that betrayed her confidence. "David," she said smoothly as I approached. "What a surprise. Come to join the fun?" "Not quite," I said, my tone icy. "We need to talk." Her eyes flicked to Thomas, who was standing behind me. "Ah, you brought the lapdog. How cute." Thomas bristled but said nothing. "We know everything, Emily," I said. "About Marino. About the money laundering. You've got nowhere left to run." Her smile didn't falter. "You think you've cornered me? Please. You're both just pawns in a game you don't even understand." I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. "Marino knows where you are. He's coming for you. Unless you want to find out what happens when you cross him, you're going to come with us." For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. But she quickly masked it with a smirk. "You're bluffing," she said. "Am I?" I countered. Before she could respond, the sound of heavy footsteps approached. I turned to see two large men in suits heading straight for us. Marino's men. Emily's composure shattered. She grabbed the chips in front of her and bolted from the table, shoving past other patrons as she made a beeline for the exit. "Emily, stop!" I shouted, chasing after her. Thomas and I followed her through the maze of slot machines and blackjack tables, the flashing lights and deafening noise disorienting us. But Emily was fast, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she darted toward the elevators. She reached them just as the doors were closing. I managed to wedge my arm in, forcing them back open. "Get out of my way, David," she screamed, pulling a small handgun from her purse. I froze, my hands raised. "You're making this worse, Emily." She hesitated, her hand trembling. "Think about it," I said, my voice calm. "You're not going to get out of this alive if you keep running. Marino's men are here. They're not going to give you another chance." Her eyes darted between me and the elevator panel, her mind racing. Finally, she lowered the gun. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I didn't have a choice." "Then let's fix this," I said. We didn't make it far. As we exited the elevator on the parking level, Marino himself was waiting, flanked by his men. His face was calm, almost amused, but his eyes were cold. "Emily," he said, his voice like silk. "You've been very naughty." She froze, her face pale. "Victor, I can explain." He raised a hand, cutting her off. "No more excuses." I stepped between them, my heart pounding. "Take her," I said. "She's the one you want." Marino's gaze shifted to me, then to Thomas. He seemed to weigh his options, finally nodding. Fair enough, he said. But there's still the matter of my money. She emptied everything, I said. There's nothing left. Marino smiled thinly. Then you'll work for me until the debt is paid. What? I asked, stunned. You're clever, he said. Resourceful. I could use someone like you. Or I could let my men deal with you now. Your choice. It wasn't much of a choice. I nodded slowly, my mind racing. Smart man, Marino said. He turned to Emily, his expression hardening. As for you. Before he could finish, Emily lunged, pulling a knife from her bag. In the chaos, Thomas tackled her, and the knife clattered to the floor. Marino's men subdued her quickly, dragging her away as she screamed obscenities at all of us. See you soon, David, Marino said, his tone almost cheerful. As the dust settled, I turned to Thomas. Are we alive? He asked, his voice shaking. Barely, I said. Emily was gone, her fate sealed. And me? I was trapped in a new kind of nightmare. But as we left the casino, I realized something, I was free of her. No matter what came next, she couldn't hurt me anymore. And that, at least, was a victory.